Hi everybody, it's Crystal. So I thought I would do a video because I get asked this a lot. Why do I always say everything, like when I measure for my tutorials, I always give the amount in yards and not grams or ounces or whatever. I'm going to tell you why I do it. Now, many people use grams as a source of figuring out how much yarn they need. Well, I'm going to tell you why I don't. Now, it may seem insignificant to a lot of people, but to me, it makes a difference, and I always go by yards. So, I've been crocheting for a long time, and I can generally, when I think about something I design, blanket, cardigan, anything, hat, I can usually, depending on the stitches, pinpoint approximately how many yards I'm going to need of that particular weight in order to complete that project. All right, but there's nothing wrong with people using ounces. I'm just going to give you some examples why I don't use ounces, because they are completely different depending. Now these are all 4-weight yarns, but they all are completely pretty much, they're different. Some of them might be pretty close, but some of them are off by quite a bit. And when you're, making a big project, being off by quite a bit can make a big difference. So, I'm just going to show you. I'm going to start. This is a 4-weight yarn here, as you can see. And it is a 100-gram ball. And it's 180 yards, okay? 100 grams, 180 yards for that 4-weight. This 4-weight right here, this is a 4-weight, 100-gram ball. We got 186 yards. Pretty close, okay? So those two would be pretty similar in weights. Okay, 100-gram ball of a 4-weight. Now this one's 230 yards. So that's 50 yards of difference, even though it's the exact same weight of yarn. It's a 100-gram ball. All right, you see the difference in that? Some yarns are this lighter than others. Some are heavier. This one is a 4-weight, and we got 220 yards. Again, it's 40 more yards than these 180 ones, which if you're making a bigger project that requires a lot of balls or a lot of hanks, that's going to make a difference, especially when you're trying to determine how much you need. 100-gram ball, 185 yards, similar to the first two. 100-gram ball here of a 4-weight. These are all 4-weights that I'm showing you. 131 yards. Now that is a huge difference to the 220 and even to the 230 and even to the 180. That is a big difference in weight there. Even though it's a 4-weight, it's just a heavier yarn. That's all. The Picasso. Everybody loves the Picasso, which it is a 4-weight, and it comes in a 50-gram ball. So if I doubled the amount of yards here and made it a 100-gram ball, it would be 252 yards of a 4-weight for 100 grams. That's the biggest one yet. 252 yards of this. That is a lot of difference between the first ones that are 100 grams, and they are both classified as 4-weights. This one's 180. This is 252 yards. Big difference. 100 grams, both of them. Well, this one's 50. I just doubled it and made it, double the amount of yardage. And, it came up to 252 yards. This one right here is a 4-weight, 50 grams. So if I was to double 188 yards, I come up with 176. So, that's in line with about the first one. It's a little bit less. And I got one more 4-weight here to show you. This is a 50-gram ball, 75 meters. So you got about 80. So if I doubled it, you're going to have about 160 yards. Still a 4-weight, still less than the 180, a lot less than the 252, and it's still quite a bit more than the 131 yards. So that right there, even though, the majority of them, are ranging between 180 to 200, there are quite a few. I could dig around for a long time in fine yards that have like 100 grams, but they hardly have 100 yards in them. And they're still 4-weights. The yarns just don't weigh the same. Even though they're 4-weights, even though they are 100 grams, I mean, they weigh the same. They're just not the same amount of yardage. So if I was to make a project with this one, which I think had the least amount of yards, 131, versus this one, which had the most for 100 grams, which was 252, think how wrong I would be, you know, because I calculated by yard. Well, think how wrong I would be if I used grams as a calculation. This, I wouldn't get enough of this because that's so little. And this one I would get probably way too much of. You know, there's just such a discrepancy in the yarn weights. Now that don't just go, I'm gonna show you another one. This is a 4-weight as well. Now this is 10 ounces and there's 482 yards of a 4-weight yarn. This is 2 ounces less. 2 ounces less, all right? And it has almost the same amount of yardage. They're both 4-weights. It has 7 more yards in it. That's it. 7 more yards, and it has 2 ounces less. So as you can see, this has way more than this one as far as yards go. And it don't just work for 4-weights. It works for any weight that you're really thinking about. So say I'm looking at bulkies, right? So I got a bulky 5 here. We'll check it out. 200 grams. We got 270 yards, all right? 200 grams, 270 yards. And then we got a carrot cake here that is a bulky as well. And it's 227 yards, so it's, or 227 grams. It has 7 more grams in it, but check out the yardage difference. See that? See that? 481 yards for 7 more grams, or 481 yards for 7 more grams versus the 270 yards for the 200 grams here. That's way, I mean, that's just extremely different. It's like I said, you can't really, the weights on them are just not the same. You know, they're not the same. Even though they're classified as bulky 5s, and you go and your project calls for a bulky 5, and you know, you buy this, or you buy this one, either one, you're either going to have way too much, or you're going to run out of the other. Because even though they're both classified as bulky 5s, one's a little thicker than the other. And one has, even though they're just almost approximately the same amount of grams there, 7 more grams, there is over 200 more yards in this one. You know, let's see how off that is. That would be detrimental to your project right there. Trying to guess how many yards. That 200 yards off for just 7 more grams is just way too much. Now look at this one. This big bad boy here. Now this is classified as well as a bulky 5-weight yarn. All right. See it? Bulky 5, 200 grams, 600 meters. You got 600 and about 660 yards for the same amount as this 5-weight here. 200 grams, 200 grams. This one has 660 yards versus 270. So all I'm saying, that's why I don't go by grams or ounces, and I always go by yards. Yards because I live in the U.S., or meters, you know, if it's outside the U.S. That's why. Because the yarns, the sizes, even though they say 4-weight, there's just such a discrepancy. You cannot go by, well, many people do. I can't say that you can't. I don't, because of the discrepancies in the yarn weights. Even though it says it's a 5, some 5s are thin, some 5s are thick, some 4s are thick, some 4s are thins. And, you know, if you're making a big blanket, a 200-yard difference, a 400-yard difference is going to make a big difference in your project, especially if you're trying to figure out how many grams or ounces that you need. So yes, that is why I always use yards when measuring. It's easier for me to determine. I can look at this yarn and know that there's 252 yards in this ball. I don't care about the grams because I know that this one only has 180, even though they're both 4 weights. You know, that's 70 yards difference there. You know what I mean? So I go by the yards, so I know approximately, you know, if I want to make a blanket, approximately how many yards I'm going to need. Because I got that down pretty pat, because when I was taught to crochet, I was never taught to go by grams nor ounces. It was only yards. So that's how I learned. Now I understand those who learned by grams and ounces, and that's cool that you do it that way. That's fine with me. But I'm just trying to explain the reasons, because a lot of people ask me why I don't, you know, go by that, why I always say yards. Okay, so one last thing here. So say, you know, I always, if you watch my videos, I always give the amount needed of yarn in yards. So if I was to say that you needed 1,000 yards of a 4-weight yarn, you could go to this one right off and know how many yards are here, and know that there's 252 yards, so you would know that you would need 4 balls of this. If you was to choose this 4-weight, you could look at it and see that there was only 131 yards, so you know that you would need to buy a lot more to equal 1,000 yards. Now say I did not use yards in my video and I only told you grams. Now some patterns do only say grams or things like that. Now if I said that you needed 400 grams of a 4-weight yarn to finish this tutorial, and you bought 400 grams of this, and then you bought 400 grams of this, well, this would have almost this one would have double the amount of yarn versus this one. All right, so say I used this yarn in my project, but you didn't want to use this yarn, or you couldn't use it, and I said only that you needed 400 grams of a 4-weight. So you went and looked at other 4-weight yarns, and say you came upon this one and you bought 400 grams of it. Now 400 grams of this would be 1,000 yards. That would have been what I would have used in my project. Now 400 grams of this is going to be about half of that. You wouldn't have bought enough because of the amount of yardage and this yarn being heavier. So, but by me telling you the amount of yards, you'll always get it right, regardless. Because you can look right there and know that even though this is a 100-gram ball, that there are 131 yards. And even though that this is 50, but if I doubled it, that 100 grams would equal 252 yards. So you could choose any 4-weight that you wanted, because I said you needed 1,000 yards of a 4-weight, and just look at the yards on it and calculate how much you need. Versus if I told you only grams, that's gonna be, you can calculate that, but that's a lot more work, I think, to do nowadays, because of the indiscrepancies in yarn sizes. It's just easier to go by yards. Now that's only for me, like I'm saying. And I try to make patterns as easy as possible, so that's why I always give the amount in yards. Now I do yards because, like I said, I am in the US and we do say yards. But you know, I try to say meters when I can, but most of the time I do say yards. So yeah, that's why I do it. It's just easier to look up 1,000 yards of a 4-weight, you know, because I always say you can use any 4-weight you want, and see how many you need. You know, the discrepancy is real. Right there it is. Use 100 grams. See what the difference is. Versus if I was to say 400 grams and I didn't tell you how many yards it was. You know, you're just going to get a lot less with this. You wouldn't have enough. So that's it. That's why I do it in yards. I hope that makes sense. Now, I'm not saying that anybody is wrong in doing it any way that you want. Whatever winds your hank, right? I learned by yards. I go by yards. I'll never change because that's how I learned. Lots of people go by ounces and grams and whatnot. That's cool, man. Like I said, whatever winds your hank, whatever helps you determine how much yarn you need. I don't care. Whatever, the world, everybody's different. It's beautiful. That's why it's beautiful, because everybody's different. All right, so I'm going to ask one thing for those of you that do use ounces or grams versus yards or meters. This is sheer curiosity on my part because I have never done it that way, and I am honestly just curious. Without knowing the amount of yardage in a ball, on average, how many yards or meters of yarn do you think that you get in 100-gram ball of a 4-weight yarn? That's what I want to know. I'm just curious, Yeah, like I said, there's no right or wrong answer to what you use to determine how much yarn you need. I'm just really honestly curious. Like I said, I have never in my life used grams or ounces. And like I said, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm missing something. I'll never change because I was taught to use yards, ever since I was little. Never once have I ever paid attention to grams or ounces. I only say them when I'm showing you yarn because I know some people use grams and ounces. To me, they mean nothing. Do not care what they mean. They don't mean anything to me because that's not what I use for measurements for my crochet designs. But like I said, I am generally just out of curiosity. If you had a 4-weight yarn and 100 grams of a 4-weight yarn, and you didn't know how many yards were in that 4-weight yarn, how many do you think would be in 100 grams? Curious, just curious. All right, I'm gonna go. Remember, there's nothing. I don't mean anything bad by this video. I'm not dissing anybody at all. It's just I'm curious. I'm just curious, and then I just wanted to explain why I don't do it, because a lot of people ask. It's just, for me, I learned it that way, and it's the yarn discrepancies. I'm sure there's ways that you can figure out weighing it and whatnot and all that kind of stuff, but actually for me it's easier just to give you the yardage, and you can pick out any yarn that you want in the same weight classification. You don't have to go by ounces or grams. You just pick out you find a yarn you like that's a 4-weight, and you get the amount of yards that I say in the video tutorial or in the pattern. To me, that just seems easier, but everybody's different. So I'll see you guys in my next video. All right, bye guys.